What we're doing today does not happen everywhere. We're taking institutions with long and distinguished histories, institutions we need, institutions we rely upon, and we're applying scrutiny, review, and inspection. We're testing, we're probing, we're challenging, we're even criticizing. And we're doing this because we need these institutions to be above reproach. We need them to be respected and trusted. We need them to be above bias, taint, and prejudice. We need these institutions to be fair, just, even-handed, proportional, and wholly immune from the vagaries of politics. That's what we expect and demand and need from the Department of Justice and the FBI, and those expectations should be consistently exacting because the power we give prosecutors and law enforcement is an awesome power. The power to prosecute, the power to charge, the power to indict is the power to impact reputations. It's the power to deprive people of their liberty. It is the power, in some instances, to even try to take the very life of a citizen. And we give police and prosecutors tremendous powers. And with those powers comes a corresponding expectation of fairness and just dealing. This Inspector General's report should conjure anger, disappointment, and sadness in everyone who reads it. This IG report lays bare the bias, the animus, the prejudging of facts by senior FBI agents and senior attorneys. And attempts to minimize and mitigate this bias are so antithetical to what we want and deserve in our law enforcement officers, and it's dangerous to the broader community. I've seen media efforts, and I've seen efforts from some, not all, but some of my Democrat colleagues to shift the burden of bias onto those impacted by that bias. That it is somehow the responsibility of those affected by bias to show how that bias negatively impacted them. What a dangerous shifting of the burden. It is not the public's job to prove the bias shown by the FBI did not influence decision-making. It is the FBI's job to prove to the public that this manifest bias was not outcome determinative. And bias and fairness cannot coexist. And that is why no lawyer seated up here today would ever allow a biased juror to sit on his or her jury. And no citizen would ever allow a biased police officer or judge to work on any matter of any significance. There is a presumption that bias is bad, and that is a presumption we should accept in nearly every single facet of life. As we read this report, we're reminded of Jim Comey's decision to hold the July 5th press conference and appropriate the charging decision away from the prosecutors. We see Jim Comey drafting an exoneration memo before important witnesses, like the target, were even interviewed. Ironically, this Inspector General has been accused of softening or watering down his report, when the reality is it was Jim Comey who softened and watered down his press release announcing no charges against Secretary Clinton. We see Jim Comey and Jim Comey alone deciding which DOJ policies to follow and which to ignore. We see Jim Comey and Jim Comey alone deciding whether there is sufficient evidence to support each and every element of an offense. We see Jim Comey and Jim Comey alone deciding whether to send a letter to Congress in the throes of a looming election. Now, his justification for this is that he did not have confidence in the objectivity of Attorney General Loretta Lynch. Whether it was her asking him to refer to this case as a matter rather than an investigation, or her meeting with Bill Clinton while Hillary Clinton was under investigation, or the matter he has alluded to but claims he cannot discuss publicly, clearly Jim Comey had lost confidence in the DOJ to handle the case in a way worthy of public trust. But that leads us to the one thing we did not see Jim Comey do, which was take any steps to spur the appointment of special counsel in the Hillary Clinton investigation. When he lost confidence in the Trump Justice Department, he memorialized private conversations, he leaked them, and he admitted he did so to spur the appointment of special counsel because he didn't trust the career prosecutors at the Department of Justice. When he lost confidence in the Obama Justice Department, he didn't make special memos. He didn't share them with his law professor friends. He didn't leak the information. He didn't lift a finger to get special prosecutor. Instead, he appointed himself FBI director, attorney general, special counsel, lead investigator, and the general arbiter of what is good and right in the world according to him. Now, one of the last times I spoke with Director Comey was in a committee hearing. We had a pointed exchange on what I thought was the FBI making decisions based in part on politics. And he, in his typically sanctimonious way, told me that he disagreed. He said the men and women of the FBI do not, quote, give a hoot about politics. Unfortunately, and I use that word intentionally, unfortunately, he was dead wrong. There were agents and attorneys at the FBI who gave a lot more than a hoot about politics. There's Andy McCabe, the former deputy director and acting director of the FBI, an agency which investigates and charges others for making false statements, himself accused of making false statements and showing a lack of candor. I think I recall, perhaps someone can correct me, but I think I recall some of my Democrat colleagues falling over themselves to offer a job to Andy McCabe when he was let go for making false statements and for a lack of candor. But those same colleagues apparently weren't hiring. They didn't have any openings when others in a related investigation called Russia were charged with the same offense. There were FBI agents and attorneys who decided to prejudge the outcome of the Hillary Clinton case before the investigation ended. I want you to let that sink in for a second. They prejudged the outcome of the Hillary Clinton investigation before the investigation ended, and these exact same FBI agents and attorneys prejudged the outcome of the Russia investigation before it even began. If prejudging the outcome of an investigation before it ends and prejudging the outcome of an investigation before it begins is not evidence of outcome determinative bias, for the life of me, I don't know what would be. That is textbook bias. It is quite literally the definition of bias, allowing something other than the facts to determine your decision. These agents were calling her president before she was even interviewed. They were calling for the end of the Trump campaign before the investigation even began. They were calling for impeachment simply because he happened to be elected. That is bias. And with all due respect, it's the FBI's job, not mine, to prove that bias can ever be harmless. Because I don't agree. I think bias is always harmful. So we'll spend today on a small in number but significant in leadership group of DOJ and FBI officials who had leadership and supervisory roles in the Clinton and Russia investigations and who failed to meet the basic expectations of fundamental fairness. But there are tens of thousands of FBI agents and DOJ employees who do meet our exacting expectations, and we will not be calling their names today, unfortunately, because we don't do IG investigations on agents and prosecutors who do their jobs with character and professionalism. To those agents and prosecutors who do the right thing, the right way, and for the right reasons, we'll get through this. It will be tough and it will be difficult, but we will emerge on the other side with a stronger FBI and a stronger Department of Justice because we have to. We cannot have a justice system that bases decisions on anything other than facts. To our fellow citizens watching at home, be unrelenting in your expectations of our justice system. Never lower those expectations. Respect for the rule of law is the thread that holds the tapestry of this country together. And it depends upon you having confidence in those you empower to enforce the law. And importantly, do not ever accept the notion that those victimized or impacted or negatively treated because of bias or prejudgment have any burden of proving harm. Bias is intrinsically harmful. It is the making up of your mind based on anything other than the facts. We use a blindfolded woman holding a set of scales to symbolize what we want in a justice system. And there is nothing more antithetical to justice than lowering that blindfold and making up your mind based on who is standing in front of you. That is not who we are. That is not what we should ever become. There is a saying in the courtroom, may justice be done though the heavens fall. You won't hear that saying in politics. You're more likely to hear, let's win at all costs, the heavens be damned. We can survive with politicians we don't trust. We can't survive with a justice system we don't trust.
Would you say that this investigation was done by the book?
Hard to say what by the book is.
Well, who wrote this book? If it was done by the book, who wrote it?
I think there reasons to raise questions on certain of these steps and decisions.
I think you did a good job, but the whole idea that this is normal, folks, there's nothing here normal. I don't want you to think the FBI does this day in and day out. This is not normal. Now, I think that's what you tried to find.
Yeah.
Do you believe it's pretty clear to everybody in the country by July the 5th that Donald Trump was the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party?
That's my recollection. And from the text, it's pretty
was on
clear.
the 18th. Yeah.
Right. And the texts, I think, reflect that as well.
Okay, I'm going to read this text message from Page to Strzok on August the 8th, after he'd gotten the nomination. She says, Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right? Strzok responded, no, he's not. Well, stop it. Now, I don't know how you feel about that. That's pretty unnerving. Strzok, wasn't he the lead investigator of the Clinton email investigation?
He was, in essence, the lead investigator.
Okay,
yeah.
so the head guy looking at Clinton on August the 8th says we got to stop Trump. Now, was that just idle talk? A week later, here's what they say to each other. Strzok text message to Lisa Page. I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way he gets elected, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40. Now, that's a week later. Who's Andy?
Our understanding, it was Andy McCabe, the deputy director.
So you got the deputy director meeting with the lead investigator of the Clinton email investigation, and Miss Page, who's involved somehow, meeting in Andy's office discussing taking out an insurance policy to make sure Donald Trump doesn't become president? Is that what you're telling us?
I'll be clear. I can't speak to whether Mr. McCabe was there or not.
Did you ask Mr. McCabe?
We did. He said he was not. He did not recall.
So one of them's lying. So I want you to reopen this investigation and come back and tell us, do you believe Strzok or do you believe McCabe? Because you just told me the deputy director of the FBI says he's not the Andy.
Oh, just to be clear, they're talking about a conversation in his office.
Yeah.
He is stating he does not recall whether he was there or not. And neither of those individuals are putting him in the middle of their conversation.
All I'm saying is that the Andy's office where this occurred, he wasn't there. What did Strzok? Did Strzok say he was there?
Strzok says he was there.
Well, somebody's lying. So anyway, we'll figure that out later. None of this is normal, folks. Let's look at the actual interview itself. How many people were involved in the Clinton interview on July the 2nd?
There were, I believe, 6 or 8 people present, but 2 agents conducting the interview.
So as I understand it, there were 2 agents and 2 prosecutors.
Correct.
Okay. Now, this was an email sent in February 2016 from Page to McCabe. Mm-hmm. Hey, you've surely already considered this, but in my view, our best reason to hold the line at 2 and 2, 2 agents and 2 prosecutors, is she might be our next president. How did you feel about that?
We were concerned about it, and we lay out here why we were concerned.
Okay, let's keep talking about this interview. One of the FBI agents in the interview said on Election Day to another FBI agent, you should know that I'm with her. Now, her was Clinton, right?
Correct.
How do you feel about that?
Very concerned.
Okay, eventually very concerned gets to be enough already. Mm-hmm. I'm very concerned. You know, I'm glad I don't text an email. That's one thing I'm glad I don't do. But have you ever proved a case by circumstantial evidence, Director Ray?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to write you a letter and talk about why you should reconsider your findings as to whether or not it affected the investigation. Here's what Miss Page said on March the 4th, 2016. God, Trump is a loathsome human. How do you feel about that? I mean, she's entitled to her opinion.
I think we've laid out here why we were so concerned about it.
Well, when you add it all up, as early as March, these people hated Trump, and this investigation was anything but by the book. And at the end of the day, what Comey did just blows me away as much as it does y'all. And I can't believe that this happened to my FBI. I told you the story, Mr. Ray, Director Ray, about wanting to be part of the organization, and y'all were smart enough not to take me. The bottom line is, if you're on our side of the aisle, this really does hit you hard. And we can't just write it off. I think there was a lot of bias that did affect an investigation that is, to me, almost impossible to explain using any standard that I grew up with as a prosecutor or even as a defense attorney. This is Strzok to Page on October the 20th. Trump is an effing idiot. The bottom line is, I'm glad you found what you found, Mr. Horwitz. I'm not buying that the Clinton email investigation was on the up and up. And the reason I'm not buying it is because the two people intimately involved, one, the guy, the lead investigator, clearly did not want to see Donald Trump become president of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Inspector General. There's a text exchange between FBI lawyer Lisa Page and FBI agent Peter Strzok from August the 8th of 2016. In that text exchange, Lisa Page wrote, "Trump's not ever going to become president," right with a question mark, and then right with a question mark and an exclamation point in case anybody reading it may have missed the point of her emphasis. Peter Strzok responded, no, he's not. We'll stop it. Do I have that text exchange right?
You do?
Now, Lisa Page was an FBI lawyer who worked on the Clinton email investigation.
That's correct.
Did she also work on the Russia investigation?
She did.
How about the Mueller special counsel team?
She did for a period of time.
All right, so we're 3 for 3 on her working on the two most important Bureau investigations in 2016 and beyond. Now, is this the same Lisa Page that Andy McCabe used to leak information to a news outlet?
She was his special counsel, and as we indicated in our earlier report, she was the individual through whom he provided that information.
Wasn't there also a text about an insurance policy in case Trump won in a meeting in Andy's office? She was part of that text string too, wasn't she?
Correct. That was on August 15.
All right, so this August 8 text was not the only time FBI lawyer Lisa Page was able to use the text feature on her phone. This is the same Lisa Page who admonished the agent interviewing Hillary Clinton not to go into that interview loaded for bear because Clinton might be the next president. And it's the same Lisa Page who said Trump was loathsome, awful. The man cannot become president. Clinton just has to win, and that Trump should go F himself. Now, most of those comments were before the Clinton investigation was over. And we are somehow supposed to believe that she did not prejudge the outcome of that investigation before it was over. She already had Hillary Clinton winning. I don't know how you can win if you're going to wind up getting indicted and or plead guilty or be convicted of a felony. So I think we understand the first half of that text pretty well. She didn't want Trump to win, and she wanted Clinton to win. Now for the response. Senior FBI agent Peter Strzok wrote, no, he's not. We'll stop it. Now, I think this is the same Peter Strzok who worked on the Clinton email investigation. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
Same Peter Strzok who not only worked on the Russia investigation when it began, but was one of the lead investigators at the inception of the Russia probe. Do I have the right Peter Strzok?
That's my understanding.
Now, is it the same Peter Strzok who was put on the Mueller special counsel team?
Yes.
All right, same Peter Strzok. And this is not the only time he managed to find the text feature on his phone either. This is the same Peter Strzok who said Trump is an idiot, Hillary should win 100 million to 0. Now, Mr. Inspector General, that one is interesting to me because he's supposed to be investigating her for violations of the Espionage Act at the time he wrote that. In March of 2016, he's supposed to be investigating her for violations of the Espionage Act, and he can't think of a single solitary American that wouldn't vote for her for president. I mean, can you see our skepticism? This senior FBI agent not only had her running, he had her winning $100 million to nothing. So what if they'd found evidence sufficient to indict her? What if they had indicted her? Is this the same Peter? He wasn't part of the interview of Secretary Clinton, was he?
He was present for the interview.
Huh. So 4 months before that interview where he was present, he's got her running and winning $100 million to zero. And it's the same Peter Strzok who wrote The Bigoted Nonsense of Trump. Trump's a disaster. I have no idea how destabilizing his presidency would be. He wrote F Trump. Trump is an effing idiot. On the prospects of Trump winning, he wrote, this is an effing terrifying. In addition to seeming to like the F word, I think we have the same FBI agent, Lisa Page, and the same FBI agent, Peter Strzok, working on the Clinton email investigation, the Russia probe, and on Mueller's team. So we have the right text and we got the right people. I want to make sure we have the chronology right. July 5th, 2016, Comey announces no charges for Secretary Clinton, right?
Correct.
July 28th, 2016, the FBI initiates a counterintelligence investigation into Russia and the Trump campaign. And Strzok is not only on that Russia investigatory team, he's actually leading it. So that's 3 weeks after Clinton is exonerated by Comey. Strzok is leading an investigation into Russia and possible connections with the Trump campaign. That's on the 28th of July. Now on the 31st of July, 3 days after the Russia investigation began, Strzok wrote, "Damn, this feels momentous." The other one did too, but this was to ensure we didn't F things up. This one matters because it matters. And if you happen to not know how important it is, he went ahead and put matters in all caps in case you happen to not focus on the importance of why this matters. Now, her investigation was just to make sure they didn't F things up. This one, we're 3 days into it, Inspector General Horowitz, 3 days into an investigation, but this one really matters. I wonder what he meant by saying the purpose of the Clinton investigation was to make sure they didn't F things up, but the Russia investigation, nah, that one was different. That one really mattered. You know, it almost sounds, Inspector General Horowitz, like they were going through the motions with the Clinton investigation. But boy, they sure were excited about the Russia one. Then we get to August 6th. This is less than 10 days after the Russia investigation begins, and Page says, you are meant to protect the country from that menace. And then we get to August 8th, 2016. Less than 2 weeks after the Russia investigation even began, the lead FBI agent says he will stop Trump from becoming president. This is 2 weeks into an investigation, and he's already prejudged the outcome. And we're somehow supposed to believe that that bias was not outcome determinative. I can't think of anything more outcome determinative than my bias against this person I'm investigating with only 2 weeks' worth of investigating. I have already concluded he should not be the president of the United States. And then we get to August 15th. Just over 2 weeks into the Russia investigation, Strzok says, I want to believe the path you threw out, that there's no way he gets elected, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy. Mr. Inspector General, that is 2 weeks into an investigation, and he is talking about taking out an insurance policy because he can't fathom the target of his investigation possibly becoming the president. So I want to go back to the no, he's not going to be president, we'll stop it. What do you think the it is in that phrase, we'll stop it?
Oh, I think it's clear from the context. It's we're going to stop him from becoming president.
That's what I thought too. Now, I wonder who the we is in the we'll stop it. Who do you think the we is?
Well, I think that's probably subject to multiple interpretations.
We'll see
whether
if we
we
can
is
go
the
through a
two
couple
of them or the broader or a broader group beyond that.
I mean, it's hard to fathom a definition of we that doesn't include him. So we know he's part of we. You could assume that the person he's talking with is FBI attorney who also happens to be working on the Russia investigation. She may be part of the we. But I wonder, Inspector General, did you find any other FBI agents or FBI attorneys who manifest any animus or bias against President Trump?
We did.
How many?
We found 3 additional FBI agents, as we detail in the report.
And were any of them working on the Russia investigation?
Sorry, let me just correct. 2 agents and 1 attorney.
2 other agents, 1 other attorney. Were they working on either the Russia investigation or the Mueller probe?
I believe 2 of the 3 were, but I'd have to just double check on that.
Okay. Now, Bob Mueller was named special counsel on May the 17th, 2017. 1 day later, Mr. Horowitz, 1 day later, Peter Strzok is back on his phone texting some more. For me, in this case, I personally have a sense of unfinished business. I unleashed it with the Clinton email investigation. Now I need to fix it and finish it. Fix what?
Well, there is outlined in the report what Mr. Strzok's explanation for.
Oh, I know what he
this
said.
was.
I'm asking the guy who had a distinguished career in the Southern District of New York and had a distinguished career at the Department of Justice. Would you rather cross-examine Peter Strzok on that explanation, or would you rather direct the examination on that explanation?
Probably cross-examine.
That's what I thought. How about finish it? When he said, I unleashed it, now I need to fix it and finish it. What do you think he meant by finish it?
I think in the context of the emails that occurred in August and the prior August that you outlined, I think a reasonable explanation of it or a reasonable inference of that is that he believed he would use or potentially use his official authority to take action.
But this is 24 hours into him being put on the Mueller probe. There's no way he possibly could have prejudged the outcome of the investigation. Maybe he did. Hard time finding. Inspector General Horowitz, if one of your investigators talked about Lisa Page and Peter Strzok the way they talked about Donald Trump, would you have left them on the IG investigation?
No.
Did you ever have an agent when you were a prosecutor with this level of bias?
As I've laid out here, I thought this was completely antithetical to the core values of the department and extremely serious.
Can you speak up, please?
I'm sorry.
I heard you, but you can say it where Mr. Nadler can hear you too.
My view of this was that this was extremely serious, completely antithetical to the core values. In my personal view, having been a prosecutor and worked with FBI agents, I can't imagine FBI agents suggesting even that they might use their powers to investigate, frankly, any candidate for any office.
Well, I can't either. And let me ask you this in conclusion. I think you've already, you laid out in your opening that Peter Strzok's obsession with Donald Trump and the Russia investigation may have led him to take his eyes off of the Wiener laptop and in a notably ironic way caused Jim Comey to be a little bit later in sending those letters to Congress. So that is one example of outcome determinative bias. But I got to ask you, you used to be in a courtroom. You were on the side of the United States and you worked for the Department of Justice. If someone is prejudging the outcome of an investigation before it ends, and someone is prejudging the outcome of an investigation before it even begins, what is more textbook bias than prejudging this investigation before it's over and this one before it begins? I am struggling to find a better example of outcome determinative bias than that. So what am I missing?
Well, I think certainly with regard to the Russia investigation you mentioned, as you know, we are looking at that in an ongoing way. With regard to the Clinton email investigation, I think as we lay out here and go through it, we looked at text messages, emails, documents to try and assess whether the specific decisions that we were asked to look at and then the ultimate prosecutorial decision were impacted by Strzok, Page, and the others' views. And what we ended up finding, particularly as to the prosecutor's decision, was that was a decision they made exercising their discretion on their view of the policy, the law, and the facts as it was found. We've laid that out, and in our view, we didn't find or see evidence that the prosecutors were impacted by that bias. But as I mentioned in my opening statement, the idea here was to put out the facts for the public, members of Congress to see, and so that folks who want to take a look at those issues obviously can assess them themselves.
Well, my time is up. I hope one of my other colleagues will explore that, because the explanation I've heard is that the failure to prosecute was predicated upon their belief that there was not sufficient evidence of intent on her behalf. And I don't know where in the hell you would go to find better evidence of intent than interviewing the person who actually was doing the intending. And when you make up your mind that you're not going to charge someone, and you make up your mind that you need to not go in loaded for bear, and then you read the 302 and there's not a single damn question on intent, it is really hard for those of us who used to do this for a living to not conclude they'd made up their mind on intent before they even bothered to talk to the single best repository of intent evidence, which would be her.